Welcome back to video 5, and I'm actually, this will be my favorite video. As a former teacher, I always wanted application. Great, theory's awesome, but now tell me, how can I implement this in my classroom? And so we're going to give you the top 8 trauma-informed practices that you can implement in your classroom starting tomorrow. So first we're just going to start out, and number 1, expect the unexpected. Now, I like to think of a student coming into my classroom as a soda can, right? I don't know what has happened the night before. I don't know what happened on the bus to school. I don't know what happened in the hallway. I don't know whether a smell has triggered this child, or it's a trauma-versary, as we call it, which is an anniversary to something traumatic. We just don't know. And so I can have 2 soda pop cans walking into my classroom, and either one of them could explode at any time. One maybe had a great morning, had a breakfast, came in and was fine, and if I ask them to do something, they'll have no problem to sit down and do it. But then I might have my other student come in who has been shaken up and walks in, and I trigger them in some way, and I have an explosion happen. And so if we expect the unexpected coming in from transition times, so that would be first thing in the morning, right after lunch, coming back from PE, any of those things, then I need to set up the environment to calm the soda can. And so we're going to talk about calming the environment, but that you need to be thinking, expect the unexpected, and your students coming in are soda cans, so you don't know what has happened that might have shaken them up prior to coming into your classroom.
The second application we want to give you is this idea of sharing control in the classroom. And so control is a really important component of human life. And in a socialist setting like a classroom, there's always a struggle for control. And students come into the room and they are really powerless. Now it depends on whether you're working with younger kids or maybe teens, but kids kind of come into a classroom and the teacher has 100% of the control and the students have 0. And we feel like it's really beneficial for you to share some of the control that you have because it's empowering to your students. And so when we look at how we're going to do this in a classroom, I'm going to give my students choices, and I'm going to allow them to slowly, as we build a relationship from the beginning of the year, I'm going to start to relinquish some control to them. And I'm going to do that by offering them choices. So I may not really care what order the segment of the morning goes. And so I might ask my students, ask as a whole, I would say, do you guys want to do the quiz first and then do this section in the book, or do you want to do the section first and then the quiz? Because for me, it doesn't really bother me. Either way is totally fine. But it allows them to feel like they have some control in how the day is going to go. I can ask them later, would you guys like to take a break now, or would you like to take a break in 15 minutes? And by doing that, what I convey to my students, again, on this kind of nonverbal communication level, I'm conveying to them that I trust them and that their words and their choices during the day have an effect on me, and they can have some control in the classroom. I think that's really vital that we give them, that we share with them some control in the classroom. And now some students, it doesn't bother them, but a lot of students who have trauma in their background, they come in feeling very helpless, and they feel like they never have any control. Things happen to them. Their perception is that they are always told what to do. They're always told what to wear. They never have any control in life outside of school. So when you take that student and you say, hey, I trust you enough that I'm going to allow you to make a decision and decide something in the classroom, it goes a long ways for some students. I had a student in my room that he always wanted to push back. When I would tell him to do something, I would say, hey, you need to, whatever it was, I would tell him they needed to get something done, or would you open your book, or whatever it was, there was always pushback. And so as I started to kind of think about this student, what always this was when I was a new teacher, and I feel like this was a learning experience for me. In front of his peers, if I said, hey, open your book, or do your homework, or whatever it was I was telling him, there would always be resistance. And it wasn't because they didn't want to do it, it was because they didn't want to look like, in front of their peers, that I was telling them what to do. So it was a strange thing. It took me a while to pick up on this, but then I realized when I talked to that student outside of that social anxiety, peer pressure environment, it was a very different student. And I'd say, hey, why, I didn't appreciate that. And he'd say, okay, sorry. He would listen to me and we would have a good conversation. And so what I realized is when you're communicating to your students in your classroom at the secondary level, you've got to be aware that they are very hyper aware of the social interactions and the peer pressure from their peers in the class. And so instead of coming down with authority and saying, hey, stop tapping your pencil, pick that up and change, again, now you can even hear it even here, I'm changing the tone of my voice and the cadence of my voice, and I'm being very direct, and probably my body posture changes. And so now I've created a power struggle, because if the student says, I'm not doing it, well, now what am I going to do, right? Now I'm going to escalate. We're going to have, and of course, what all the other students do, now they are all watching to see, oh, who's going to win this power struggle? So I just
And there's no winner in that. There's no winner in a power struggle in a whole classroom with peer pressure with a teenager.
And I just fell into a trap that I set for myself. I didn't need to set that trap, right? I know, big deal that, a student dropped a piece of paper on the floor. I can change the way that I communicate that to them, and I can say, hey, before you go, would you make sure you pick that up off the floor? Or if a student's tapping their pencil, I can put a little note, a sticky note, and walk by and just put it on their desk so no one else knows. And I can just say, hey, your pencil tapping is bothering other students. Or could you tap on your fingers so that you can still tap your pencil, but no one else can hear it. Or so find good non-confrontational ways to communicate to your students that they have control, and that you're not intimidated, or you are not stressed out, and that you're calm, and that you're okay to trust them with them making some decisions.
Number 3 is you're going to plan intentional interactions. And when we talked about the brain and we talked about changing the brain in a child with trauma, we talked about using environment, and then the other one was relationship. And so you have to be intentional. So when you look at your students and your top third, those are the students up top that are really difficult to reach. Those are the ones that you need to be intentional in your relationship with. One of the ways to do this is called 2 by 10. And that is intentionally for 2 weeks, you're going to spend 2 minutes with that student. So beginning of the day, during recess, you're going to pick a time and you're going to be intentional to relate to that child. You're going to also talk about things that are non-school related. They don't need you to come and spend 2 intentional minutes with them speaking about the homework they didn't do last night. And it might just be talking about Avengers or talking about what they did over the weekend. And the other thing is that they need to feel that you're being genuine in this. We talk about body language and posture, and I'm going to tell you that kids with a trauma background can read your vibrations. They can read whether you actually want to be sitting with them and talking with them or not. And so that's going to be something that you're going to have to really be working on if you're struggling with these kids. And Darren and I talk a lot about kids with a trauma background. It's like hugging a porcupine, all right? It's difficult. You're going to get poked. It's going to hurt. You don't want to do it, but porcupines need hugs, okay? Your students with trauma need you to be intentional to give them relationship in some way. So number 4 is control the environment. So we just talked about relationship and being able to change the brain, and now we're going to talk about environment and how that can calm a brain. And so we know that kids from hard places or who have a lot of stress, they need predictability and consistency. And so what does that look like in your classroom? In your classroom, you're going to want to have a visual schedule. Right? Your kids need to walk in and know what's going to happen. And if there's going to be a change to the schedule, you need to let those kids know. Hey, today we were going to have PE. I saw that was on there. PE teacher is sick today, so we're going to do this instead. You're always giving them that forewarning, especially when there's a change to routine. Because remember, these are your soda cans that have been shook up, and any type of change is automatically going to signal that brain, oh my gosh, something bad's about to happen. The other thing that you can do is a lot of your students walking in are going to want to, they need you, right? Because you are co-regulating in your classroom. You're that secure base. And if if you know this going in, then what you can do is you preload your students with attention. And so I love using sticky notes, and Darren mentioned the sticky note for secondary, but it also works with our primary and our junior high kids as well. A lot of times when kids are doing independent work, we'll say, we'll get back to you in a minute. Or you're going and you're working with other students and you're going to see these kids start behaving and acting up. And a lot of that is because in that moment, nothing's predictable and consistent for them. They're alone in their thoughts. They might not know how to do something. A lot of these kids will shut down before they even try to do something, right? Like it's something they know how to do and already I can't do this. And so I would put a sticky note on their desk and I would put the time down, 11:45. And I would tell them, 11:45, I'm going to come check on you and I'm going to make sure and help you with any work you can't do. So if you can't do it, skip it and I'll come. If at 11:45 I'm busy, just come tap on my shoulder to remind me. So right there, I just gave that student predictability in the schedule and that he was going to have or she was going to have access to me in that moment. And so I think what's really important is that understanding that when we can use the environment to calm the brain, then we're going to have our students in their learning brain instead of survival brain. One last thing that we often don't think about with an environment is what the environment's ambiance looks like. You know, if it's chaotic in your classroom, if things are spread around, if there's lots of stuff on your walls and lots of colors everywhere, that can actually feel chaotic to a student. And so when we're dealing with kids that have a trauma brain, less is more. Less things on your walls, things organized. At the end of the day, I always had my students, we would take 5 minutes at the end of the day where my students would literally clean out their desks, organize their desk, have it set in perfect little rows, chairs pushed in. It had nothing to do with me wanting some super clean room. It actually had to do with the fact that when they walked in the morning, it was already organized and there wasn't that unpredictability and it was that consistency that calmed the brain even through external environment. And so when you're looking at environment, understand there's a great power in environment through schedules and through setting up your room and all of those things. So leverage that because that's going to help you calm those brains so that they're learning and not just sitting in that survival mode.
Number 5 is called change the channel. And so in this application, this is a little bit different because we've got to understand a little bit about how the kids' brains work. And so, you know, in the previous video, we talked about how the brain works a lot. We use a ham model, and so we know there's different parts of the brain that do different things. Well, one issue is the voice that we all hear in our head. And that voice, I teach my students this. We talk about this openly. And I teach secondary students, and I teach anatomy and physiology, and so this is a natural conversation to have in that class. But any kid could learn this. That the voice in your head lies to you. It lies to you all the time. And it's because your brain is picking up on perceptions and it's making evaluative judgments that might not be true. And so you know, most of us could relate to this, right? Because when, you know, secondary students, like one kid will come in and I'll ask him and he's like, well, there's this girl that I like. And he goes, I don't know what to think because she said, you know, some words to me and I don't know, did she mean this or did she mean that? And he's reading into all these things and he's trying to make a judgment on what she said without really understanding. And so that's always filtered through the narrative in our brains, and our brain narrative is established by our attachments and our relationships as we develop. And so the change the channel idea is that when you have students who have a negative narrative that's running in their mind, I'm worthless, I'm stupid, I hate school, I can't do this, and it's negative, 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 negative all the time. You can have a conversation with students about changing the channel, and you can tell them that their brain is like a remote control, that they can change that channel. Now, they may or may not be able to do that on their own. Most likely they're going to need some help, and so here's how you help them. When you, in your classroom, you know, you're not going to do this necessarily with one student, you can do this with all your students. At a certain point when you can kind of pick up on the tension in the room is high, or they've been really intensely working for a while, and you just say, we're going to take a break. You know, I used to use a timeout T. I was a coach, so I would use this timeout T in my classroom, and I would tell my students, hey, timeout. We're going to take a break. But breaks can be good and breaks can be bad. So if I said, hey, you've got a break, you just got 10 minutes to do whatever you want, that's going to be a problem, right? I'm going to give up too much control. Kids will be doing too many things, but I'll tell them what they can do. You've got a 3-minute break. You can get a drink of water. If you need to use the restroom, now's the time to use the restroom. If you want to read a book, I will give them a few options of things, but I always tell them to get out of their desk, right? At too much time sitting and the blood pools in the legs and parasympathetic nervous system kicks in and kids get sleepy or tired or they start to disassociate. So we want to get the blood flowing again. So I would get them out of their desk. And then if I'm going to take a break, what I like to do is I would say, hey, I'm going to change the channel. Now, I don't always use that language with my secondary students. I would just know that's what I'm doing. I would say, we're going to play a game. We're going to do something fun. And I know the way the brain works. And that voice in your head is in what they call that default mode network that you just go to all the time. It's just always running, and your brain is running in that mode. Well, there's another network in your brain called the task positive network. This is great stuff. You can do a little research on these neural networks. The task positive network is a network in the brain that is different than your default mode network, and it is engaged when you are doing some novel activity. So put the kids around a table, hey, we're going to learn a new game. And for the first 30 minutes or so of me teaching them this game and them playing, they will be in that task positive network in their brain and not the default mode network. So why does that matter? The reason it matters is because the default mode is usually negative. And what it does is it's always accessing memories to tell us of thinking about the past, or it's trying to predict the future later. And so what it does is it tends to rob us of the moment. And so when you take your students and you put them in a game, or you get out a guitar and you play a song, or you do something rhythmic and you get them up and dance, or just something fun with them, it puts their brain in a different mode, a different network. And that task positive network is a network that allows them to be in the moment. They're not worried about yesterday. They're not worried about later when they have to get on the bus. And they're not focused on themselves, right? That default mode network is always about me. So when we play a game, it literally changes the way the brain is working, and it's a great way to change the channel. And it may just take 2 or 3 minutes, and then you get them back on track and you get them back in their desks. But it will be beneficial to you throughout the length of a long school day to take some of those breaks. Number 6 in this application video is reducing negative thinking. Now, in that last one, number 5, we just talked about some of this negative narrative that students have going on in their mind. And so we do things in our classroom to help with that. We use things like calming chairs and places for kids to go. Sometimes, though, that's a bad idea, because if a kid is in their mind saying all these negative things and we go put them by themselves in a chair to calm down, well, all that's happening is they're repeating negative thoughts in their mind over and over again. It's not really going to make them feel better. And so what we want to do is we want to find positive ways to overcome the negativity. And so what we like to do is kind of use this sandwich idea, where we sandwich a constructive criticism comment. It's not truly negative, but their perception might be that it's a negative comment. When they do a math problem wrong and I need to correct them, or they working on the scientific method in my science class and they got some steps out of order and I need to redirect them and help them fix it. Well, that's not really a big deal, but some students, that is a big deal. Some students, that they're going to react to that because all they're going to do is hear that they did it wrong. And they already believe they always do everything wrong. And so that's going to reinforce that negative thought. So what we want to do is we want to have a positive comment, then the constructive criticism, and then another positive comment. And we sandwich that sort of quasi-negative comment in the middle. And so you can say to a student, hey, I really like how you did that right there. That's a creative way to solve that problem. And then on this, you can just change a few of these things, and then that'll be more correct. And then I like also how you ended this statement over here. So you take and you make a positive reflection, an observation. You then give some feedback, some criticism. You can say, yep, well, this one's wrong. You need to work on redo this one. But you did these 3 right. So all that does, again, in this communication idea, you're communicating to your students that you see the good, not just look for the bad. There's lots of times we see these analogies where people just always focus on the negative. You can do 100 things right and you do 1 thing wrong, and that's what everybody picks out. Don't be like that in your classroom. Always look for the positive. Sandwich a few negatives or constructive criticism thoughts, always couched in between 2 positive comments, and it'll make a difference for your students.
So number 7 is actually something that feels very personal to me as a parent. Darren and I have 7 kids, and 5 of our kids have IEPs or 504s. And so we spend a lot of time going in and talking about how to build up the deficits or fix the deficits in our kids. And so number 7 is called creating islands of competence. Islands of competence is all about the idea that when you're looking at your student, or when I'm walking into an IEP meeting, that instead of looking to fix the deficit, I want to build on where my child is competent, because we're going to find better outcomes when we're actually building on competence instead of trying to fix a deficit. And so an example of this is our son, he really struggles in math. And so, you know, we kept putting in all these interventions and we kept trying to do all these things. And I'm going to be honest, if you guys really think about it, a lot of times we punish what our kids are competent at in order to get them to fix a deficit. And so in this example of my son, he loves Legos and drawing and things like that. And so we were telling him, until this math is done, you don't get to do this anymore. We're taking Legos away for a time. And so what we had done in that was take away what he was competent at in order to try and fix what we thought he was having a deficit in. Well, we had a really brilliant teacher working with our son this past year, and she started incorporating his competence areas in with where he was having deficits. And he started feeling so good about what he was good at that the areas that he was struggling in, we saw him start excelling at. And so I think when we're looking at a classroom of students, that what we need to be looking at with our kids is, what are you good at? And ask them, what are you good at? And typically it's whatever they find joy in. And let's make sure that we're not punishing competence in order to fix deficit. Let's instead build competence, and we'll watch deficit tend to rise. And so to me, again, number 7 is the super personal one, because we really learned that this last year of where we were trying so hard to fill in where what we thought was this gap, where the reality is if we're building on competence, we're actually helping our son to rise even further in his education.
So number 8, this one's going to be maybe controversial, but number 8 application is stop teaching the way you were taught. Say that again, stop teaching the way you were taught. And the reason why we feel like this is a valid application is because in education circles, right, in going through college and learning how to be a teacher, they give you all these ways of manipulating kids' behavior and getting them to do things and getting them to achieve, you know, using sticker charts and all these things that teachers go, oh yeah, that gives me a tool. Well, okay. Yes, those are not necessarily bad, but here's the problem. If you take a bell curve of all the students in schools today, right? You take this bell curve and you compare it to maybe a bell curve from 30, 40 years ago. And in that bell curve, what we would be evaluating is like the mental health of our students, or the quality of their relationships and their attachments at home. And so when we have solid homes with families that are well attached, that makes a huge difference when they come in the classroom. And so what would happen is that curve would move towards mostly being students that are well adjusted, that respond to things like sticker charts and can't wait to read another book because they get a stamp on their hand that they get to show off, right? Like some students that really resonates with. But in our society today, families have started to not stay together. The divorce rate is really high. Families are really complicated. You have lots of in-laws and you have lots of extended families. And so what you see, the reflection in that is in our students, that bell curve has started to move, and the average student is now not what the average student used to be. But our educational system is still built to teach the way that society was a long time ago. And so our point is, you have to meet your kids where they are. And if you have a lot of kids with trauma or have issues, or they come from hard places, a sticker chart is meaningless to a kid who doesn't know if they're going to get to eat dinner. A sticker chart is meaningless to a kid whose parents don't pay any attention to them, or who doesn't have parents and lives with a grandma or grandpa. Or And so here's what happens. That student who has that negative narrative comes into class, and every day they look at that sticker chart, and they have no stickers on that sticker chart. And other kids are marching along and have 25 and 30 little stars next to their name, and they have none. And it could be because their reading skills are so low they can't read. It could be that when they go home, they don't have time to read because they have to do the dishes, they have to take care of their siblings, they have a job. And so what we end up doing is by rewarding the positive for some students, we're sort of punishing other students. And so we don't want to do that. It kind of excludes those students who might not have the right skills or might just not have the right home life. Teaching at the secondary level and studying poverty, what happens when kids come from poverty is an issue like homework comes into play. And homework, when kids don't do homework and they end up with a bad grade, it's really reflective of their home life. And it's almost like a family grade, because I know my children, when they come home from school, I have to make them do their homework. I have to tell them, hey, get your homework out, let's sit down and do it. And that's how they get it done, and that's how they turn it in. If I choose to not say anything, they will not ever probably do their homework. Now, these are elementary students. And so we need to recognize that we need to find good ways to communicate with our students and to reward and not accidentally sort of punish students that might be thinking a little differently. And the way we feel like you do that is by building those relationships. Just build relationships with your kids so that you can have good quality conversations with them. And then if you have a student who you know has some of those issues at home and they're not going to ever get a sticker on that chart, find another way to communicate to that child that they're valuable and work with them individually to find little steps to be successful. So there is a path to success, not just constant reminder of failure.
Well, hopefully you guys have got a lot out of video 5. Again, I think that, just to reiterate what Darren said, so much of what we learned when we went through college and we're learning to become teachers didn't really work in the classroom for us. And we, at the end of the day, the biggest thing was just understanding that every kid is different. Every student walking into your classroom has had different experiences in life, and just seeing below the behaviors, seeing below the surface, and really what is that underlying need for that child. And so thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.